Breaking news. Police warn of a significant threat in Calgary. We're near the home that officers have surrounded for more than 24 hours. Also on this Friday night, procurement problems.
Well, as a former public servant, I'm embarrassed.
Concerns over how companies win federal contracts worth millions of taxpayer dollars. Deadly tornadoes tear through America's heartland.
There's a whole house that's blown over there.
A tragic start to the severe weather season. Plus, buzzkill, the top tennis tournament interrupted by a swarm of bees.
Bees?
And the brave beekeeper who ran to the rescue.
Global National with Farah Nasser. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin with breaking news out of Calgary tonight, where a tense standoff between a gunman and police has now dragged on for over 24 hours. The volatile situation began yesterday afternoon in the city's northeast after shots were fired at police. Nearby residents have been told to shelter in place and others to avoid the area.
As this event continues to present a significant threat to public and officer safety. There is a real threat of death or grievous bodily harm.
Police say that shots were fired as officers were executing a search warrant at the property, but they provided few other details so far. Heather Yourex-West joins us now from near the scene of the standoff. So Heather, what more have you learned?
Yeah, this is a standoff that it looks like it's going to be stretching into a second day. Police giving an update saying that residents should be prepared to be out of their homes for the night. Efforts to de-escalate this situation have so far failed. We know that police have a standoff on their hands with a man heavily armed in his home since yesterday afternoon, as you mentioned, when police executed a search warrant related to a firearms offense, and from there the situation escalated quickly and has been very tense since then.
It is pretty terrifying.
There's definitely been gunshots. I'd say the first one started at about 4:15. Those were the first ones. Then there was some around 7. Then at around 8 o'clock, they tried 4 bangs that smoked the house right out. Nothing. At 3:30, approximately 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, there was another 2 flashbangs and a shootout, and now nothing. Now we've been I've been evacuated finally, 22 hours later.
And police say that they expect to have to evacuate more people as they expand the red zone to try and keep neighbors safe. So an emergency operations center has actually had to be opened up for these people that have been displaced. The city says that they will be providing accommodation as they continue to deal with this situation, warning that it will take as long as it takes. It continues to be quite dangerous, and they tell me that they will either keep things kind of status quo or escalate if the suspect himself escalates the situation further.
Has he been using his firearms?
The suspect is actively shooting at the Calgary Police Service. We have utilized non-lethal tactics to help facilitate a surrender. However, to date, it's been unsuccessful. We will continue with these tactics until such time that we do have a peaceful surrender. However, should the situation escalate, we are prepared to intervene and stop any harm to the public or to officers.
Now, as you heard, the police say that the suspect continues to actively shoot at police, so very dangerous situation. People are being asked to avoid the area. A number of people remain out of their homes. This is a neighborhood with many young families. An elementary school is not far from this scene. So very tense times. And once again, Calgary police warning that this armed standoff may go through a second night. Jeff?
All right, Heather Yourex-West tracking developments in Calgary. Thanks, Heather. The Prime Minister and Quebec's Premier faced off in Montreal today in a dispute over immigration. François Legault asked Justin Trudeau to grant Quebec full control over how many immigrants and asylum seekers are allowed into that province. The Premier says Quebec has surpassed its capacity and immigration control is crucial to preserving the future of French.
If we want to protect our language, our nation, our identity, our culture. We need to have the powers regarding immigration.
The Premier's request for full control of immigration was rejected by the Prime Minister, but that wasn't the only item on Legault's wish list. Mike Armstrong reports.
In happier times, the two men tend to get along. The last time Prime Minister Trudeau met one-on-one with Quebec's Premier, more than 14 months ago, they grabbed a casual coffee, then sat down for business. The contrast Friday was striking. Strained smiles and a brief and awkward photo op. The difference this time is François Legault went in with a big ask, $8 billion to help with asylum seekers.
We didn't get any answer from Mr. Trudeau.
Now, that bill, François Legault says, is compensation for Quebec's outsized share of asylum seekers. More than half living in Canada are in Quebec. It's meant shortages of nurses, teachers, and housing are getting worse. Healthcare and education are two of the biggest expenses for Quebec, and they're ballooning.
In average, it's an increase of those two budgets by 2.5%. So it's a huge amount.
Legault also went into the meeting with another demand. He wants Quebec to have more control over immigration. One proposition he made was that Ottawa would only approve temporary workers that have already been approved by Quebec.
Mr. Trudeau said that he was open. He didn't say that he agrees, but he said that he's open for discussion.
Now, the Prime Minister was considerably clearer on new powers. It was a no. Trudeau admitted Quebec is doing more than its share in terms of asylum seekers, but said it's not an issue of jurisdictions, but solutions.
We're all about rolling up our sleeves and working with the provincial government.
Quebec is a nation.
Now, recent tough talk may have backed Quebec's Premier into a corner. Opposition parties are criticizing Legault for walking away Friday without anything concrete, whether in terms of powers or payment. Well, Legault insists he's considering pushing in other ways.
On examine toutes les options.
He says he's looking at all his options, but for now, won't say what they might be. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Turning now to the problems plaguing the federal government's procurement process. This week, we heard baffling testimony from contractors behind the now notorious ArriveCan app who took home millions in taxpayer dollars. But concerns around the government's procurement process extend far beyond that single case. Abigail Beeman explains.
Do you think Canadians got value for their money for the ArriveCan scam?
We were asked to do a job for a price, and we did it.
That price, $59 million, according to the Auditor General, is just not acceptable to many Canadians. Nor was the testimony of the two people behind the biggest ArriveCan contract.
I feel like the application was a success.
It all raises bigger questions about procurement problems with other questionable examples. A Global News investigation found big issues with COVID rapid tests, including the government picking more expensive tests imported from overseas over tests manufactured in Canada. And this week, we learned the Office of the Auditor General fired 2 employees and is investigating a third for having undisclosed side contracts with the government.
If there is a solution that's needed quickly, then it's always the point of least resistance is to use an existing contract versus doing a new RFP.
As a former public servant, I'm embarrassed.
Alan Williams says it's not supposed to be about the path of least resistance. Federal rules make it clear you need fair and transparent competition. And he would know, as a former assistant deputy minister who managed procurement for more than $8 billion in acquisitions.
The values and ethics have to inculcate into the department from the top, telling their staff, we are responsible for the integrity of the process, do your due diligence, make sure taxpayers' money is being spent correctly. That didn't happen here. The lack of oversight is obvious.
It's definitely broader than just ArriveCan, and that's what's got us so worried.
Laura Chang of the tech nonprofit Code for Canada says the government needs to be more agile and flexible in tech procurement and build up the right expertise within government, even though she says outsourcing is still sometimes necessary.
What we really need is a redesign of the system. What does a modern digital procurement system look like? And how can we ensure that it's going to yield the outcomes that are necessary for a modern digital government in Canada?
There are still so many questions swirling around ArriveCan and investigations underway, including by the RCMP and a new investigation by the Privacy Commissioner. Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
A Russian ballistic missile attack on Ukraine has killed at least 20 people and injured more than 70 others, making it Moscow's deadliest attack in weeks. Ukrainian officials say 2 missiles targeted the port city of Odessa. Meanwhile, across the border in Russia, at least 2 people were killed after an attack that's being blamed on Ukraine's armed forces. Local officials say the shelling damaged multiple buildings, including homes. Vladimir Putin vowed to respond to those attacks, which he called an attempt by Ukraine to derail Russia's presidential elections. Voting began today and will continue through the weekend, though the result is almost certain to extend Putin's rule in Moscow. But as Crystal Gamansing reports, the first day of voting also saw plenty of acts of defiance.
Top generals to average citizens. Everyone casting a ballot was told by Vladimir Putin that their vote is meaningful. Since the last day of 1999, Putin has either been prime minister or president of Russia. This author and professor says the election is more of an event to highlight Putin's authority.
With respect to the elites, this shows that, unlike all of them, he actually has an electoral mandate. No matter how fake, it still kind of counts for something.
Voting will last another 3 days as more than 112 million are eligible to cast a ballot, including those in regions Russia has illegally annexed. Ukrainian officials quickly dismissed elections happening on occupied territories. Another Putin victory will mean a continuation of the war in Ukraine and alignment with authoritarian regimes, says Randall Stone, professor of political science.
It seems that his sort of aggressive anti-Western style of foreign policy will continue as long as he's in office.
Russian critics often end up dead. Putin's biggest political opponent, Alexei Navalny, died last month while being held in a Russian jail. Yet there is still signs of public defiance against the Kremlin. A voting booth was set on fire in Moscow, and at another polling station in the capital, a woman is seen on CCTV depositing some paper into a ballot box and then a dark liquid.
They're very impressive that someone would risk jail or a large fine by going out and demonstratively opposing the elections.
Alexei Navalny called for a mass action on Sunday at noon of everyone who supported him or opposed the regime would go and try to vote all at the same time.
The action won't change the outcome of the election, but it may give those inside and outside Russia the truest indication yet of Putin's popularity. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
Israel's prime minister says Hamas's latest demands for a hostage deal are, quote, absurd, after Hamas delivered what it called a comprehensive vision of a ceasefire plan. Hamas's latest proposal reportedly includes a permanent ceasefire and a full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu called the demands unrealistic, but says a delegation will still travel to Qatar to continue talks on a potential truce. Netanyahu also says he's approved plans for a military offensive in the Gazan city of Rafah. That despite growing international calls to hold off on the attack over fears of mass civilian casualties. Israel, meanwhile, is also denying claims that it was responsible for an attack that left at least 21 people dead and more than 150 injured on the southern outskirts of Gaza City. The Hamas-run health ministry says Israeli forces opened fire on a crowd desperate to receive aid from a truck convoy. More of that aid landed today on the Gazan coast. The Open Arms charity vessel delivered nearly 200 tons of supplies, part of a test run for a new aid route by sea from Cyprus. A major blow today to Donald Trump's efforts to delay legal proceedings against him until after November's presidential election. The judge overseeing Trump's criminal trial in Manhattan has agreed to delay that trial, but only until mid-April. That case centers on allegations that Trump falsified company records to hide hush money payments to an adult film star. Meanwhile, in Georgia, a judge ruled that District Attorney Fani Willis can remain in charge of that state's election interference case against Trump, but only after the special prosecutor, Nathan Wade, agreed to resign. Willis and Wade admitted that they had a romantic relationship, but rejected allegations by Trump and his co-defendants that Willis benefited from it. The judge says there was no evidence of any conflict of interest. Mother Nature's wrath in the U.S. Midwest. Coming up, the destruction from a series of deadly twisters. A series of powerful and destructive tornadoes touched down in multiple U.S. states Thursday night, leaving a trail of destruction. At least 3 people were killed in Ohio, while dozens more were injured in both Indiana and Kentucky. Jackson Prosco reports on the extent of the damage.
Oh, my God. Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, those poor people.
Just as darkness fell and with little warning,
Tornado on the ground.
A string of powerful tornadoes swept across Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky, leaving behind complete devastation.
My aunt and uncle, their house is gone. The roof's completely gone.
We just ran to the middle of the house into the utility room, and about 30 seconds later, it hit, and we see the damage.
Dozens of people were injured as the twisters slammed into homes, a trailer park, and even a campground where there was no place to shelter.
The entire ceiling is caved in, everything's covered, insulation, and the rear wall is about to fall.
By daylight, the extent of the damage became clear. Tens of thousands have no power, roads are blocked, and in some places there's nothing left to salvage. Search and rescue teams are now sifting through the debris, unsure if they'll find more victims or perhaps miraculous survivors.
The devastation was such that we have to get heavy equipment into these areas to be able to move this material where homes have collapsed to see if there's anybody injured.
After the warmest winter on record in the U.S., this is an ominous start to severe weather season. As residents in Tornado Alley pick up the pieces, they're watching the sky with worry. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
Still ahead, pension fund pressure. The calls from Canadian companies to invest more heavily at home. More than 90 CEOs signed an open letter urging Canada's finance minister to find ways to force this country's pension funds to invest more heavily in Canadian companies. Chrystia Freeland says she's open to the idea, but she would likely face stiff resistance from fund managers. David Aiken joins me now from Ottawa with the details. David.
Canada's pension funds have more than $2 trillion in assets, and experts say about 20% of that is invested here in Canada. But now, some say that's not enough.
There's a big multiplier effect. And pension fund managers don't see that. They don't look at that.
Frank Letko helped write the open letter that more than 90 Canadian chief executives signed. CEOs from the likes of Rogers, TELUS, Canadian Tire, and Maple Leaf Foods. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland signaled her intention in the fall economic statement that she would indeed like to find a way to get pension funds to direct more of their money to Canadian companies. And when she held pre-budget consultations recently with a handful of pension fund managers, the topic came up.
We said that we were committed as a government to working collaboratively with Canada's pension funds to help them find more opportunities to invest here in Canada, our remarkable country.
But the managers of those pension funds think that's a bad idea. Pension funds are not designed to achieve regional economic development or corporate subsidies, said a spokesman for the Canada Pension Plan, Canada's single biggest fund. Others think that those Canadian companies that signed the letter are just trying to boost sagging share prices. It is not our role to prop up Canadian equity markets, the Alberta Investment Management Corporation said. Even advocates of boosting CanCon ratios in pension funds say that mandating a certain level of investment, that would be a mistake. But Chrystia Freeland has some options short of that, adjusting tax policy, some incentives, perhaps new regulations, and we'll find out what, if any, option she chooses when she tables her budget April the 16th. David Aiken, Global News, Ottawa.
Unbelievable. Up next, the tennis match gone wrong. Welcome back. There's been a lot of buzz about a tennis match in California, not for the competition itself, but over the uninvited patrons who suspended play. Mike Drolet reports on the rude interruption.
There was a buzz around this matchup, Carlos Alcaraz versus Alexander Zverev. It was billed as a blockbuster, yet eclipsed by a B-movie. Yes, the Bees. A few minutes into the match, Alcaraz swatted a few. But here's the thing. Bees don't like that. At all. The umpire tells Alcaraz there's no bees here, and that very clearly wasn't true. Now, bugs invading the pitch always makes for memorable video.
I've never seen this before.
Whether it's on a cricket pitch or a baseball field.
You can see how many of them are there.
But what those buggy events lacked was star power. And with the match happening so close to Hollywood, well, of course there's a bee guy with a TV show hanging around.
I used to do this as a little kid when I was like 12 to 15 years old, and it made me feel really like I actually accomplished something.
Absolutely.
It's not enough to say Lance Davis stole this show. He aced it, and he looked cool doing it.
There's Lance, what a hero. No protective gear whatsoever needed for this guy.
It was, as they say, beautiful. He vacuumed, he sprayed, before taking a victory lap of high fives and selfies around the stadium.
Come on, guys, let me do my job. Yeah, I'm on the job here.
With the queen bee and her swarm under control, the day needed a king of the court. Who won? Who cares? This was the killer bee catcher's day to shine. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Friday night. Thanks for being with us. Sorry, I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is this photo from Cap Lumiere, New Brunswick. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you back here again tomorrow.